I would like to introduce to you Kim Tran. Kim is a thought partner and advocate whose voice and work advances equity in many different spaces. Kim Tran follows a simple guidepost. Be the person you needed when you were younger. As a queer Vietnamese woman and survivor of domestic and intimate partner violence, she lives those principles through her work at the intersection of social protest, race, and gender. Kim brings social justice lessons to movement, research, and organizational spaces. Yet, what I find most inspiring about Kim is her commitment to finding alternatives in order to best serve the needs of survivors and promoting the strengths of our communities. Thank you, Kim. I look forward to being in thought partnership with you in the near future, but for now, it's my honor to ask Kim Tran to share some words with you.
Thanks so much, folks, for having me. I want to start by saying that I will be talking kind of explicitly about my experience of intimate partner rape today. So I hope folks take care of themselves. I hope, if you need to exit this conversation for whatever reason, please do. I won't be explicit, but I will be talking about the subject matter that I think we're kind of all here to learn about. So I will also be trying to keep my eye on the chat. So if you have questions, go ahead and throw them in and I'll try to address them throughout what I say today. Okay. I am a survivor of intimate partner rape. It took me 9 years to say that out loud. It took me 3 years to really process the trauma. And a couple of years ago, it took about 3 months to go through a community-supported process of making sure that my rapist stayed a continent's worth of distance away from me. Because I believe in abolition. I don't believe in prisons, I don't believe in police, and I don't believe in the criminal justice system. I am a repeat survivor. So like a lot of us, I think I've been through a lot, but sexual assault is different. It made me question everything. And I have a good friend who is also named Kim. And after a hard thing, and it can be really anything, it can be a breakup, a graduate exam, a failed job interview, she'll ask me, what did you learn? So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I learned as a survivor who believes really firmly that we are going to live to see the end of police and of prisons. So I'm going to answer a few questions right off the top. Tell you who I am. I'm going to tell you why I believe in abolition. I'm going to tell you what abolition looked like for me. And I'm going to tell you what I got at the end of this really, really, really hard process. So who am I? It's kind of first things first. My mom calls me a protest baby. My family's Vietnamese and they are refugees. And my mom is really awesome. She's a fighter. She realized when she got to this country that the only way she was ever going to get what her community needed was to fight for it. She's an active part of her union. She supports formerly incarcerated Vietnamese men. She's been going to support those folks in San Quentin prison for over a decade. And when you're the only child of a single parent who is like that, it means that you spend your whole life going to protest marches. I published queer feminist of color writing. I, in 2017, organized Hai Ba Trung School, which is a Vietnamese American social justice incubator. We teach young folks and young adults how to canvass. We teach them how to campaign. We teach them how to win racial justice in our communities. So I have spent my professional life writing, doing political education, and building movements to really take down these systems that harm communities that are mine and a lot like mine, right? Why do I believe in abolition? That's the second question. So I've got my PhD in ethnic studies from UC Berkeley, and I've spent a lifetime in movements. I know a lot of prison statistics. I've read a lot of books. I know a lot of folks who are incarcerated or were incarcerated. I know that half of all bisexual women like me are survivors of sexual assault. The CDC thinks that number is actually closer to 60%. I know that out of every 1,000 sexual assaults in the general population, only 5 rapists are incarcerated. I know that legal measures are really suspect in a country that really only puts its most vulnerable people behind bars. I know that 40% of women in prison self-identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, or they've had a same-sex sexual experience. I know that 1 out of every 2 Black transgender people has been behind bars. I know that between 2011 and 2015, the number of people sexually assaulted in prison went up 180%. And for me, here's one of the most important numbers that I know. 59% of incarcerated people are Black or they are brown. I know that abolition is really popular right now. So in this last year, we've seen abolition go from really subversive to kind of mainstream. It used to be just a small number of people who were saying, we want abolition, we want to close prisons. And now there's this really cool growing acceptance that policing and prisons are and can be tools of racial control. So we're seeing the New York Times report on protests for abolition. And we saw a lot of this after George Floyd was murdered and in another wave of Black Lives Matter. New York, New Jersey, Alaska, and California in the last couple of years have either tried to end cash bail and they've succeeded, or they voted on measures to dismantle cash bail. And you're seeing a lot of political candidates talk about racial injustice through the lens of policing and prisons. I think the sun is setting. I think the sun is setting on prisons, on policing, and the kind of racism that they enforce. But honestly, that doesn't change the fact that abolition, especially for survivors, is very, very, very hard. So I've believed in abolition for a really long time. My father is a prisoner of war and an extremely violent man. And for me, we have a choice to either break cycles of violence or perpetuate them. So it's one thing, I think, to really believe in abolition as an abstract. And it's another thing to be a survivor of sexual assault and believe in abolition in real time. So I'm going to tell you what abolition looked like for me, specifically as a process. I met my rapist in graduate school. And I think I was into him for a lot of really obvious reasons. He actually studied prisons and he was a year ahead of me. And he was everything I thought academic success was supposed to look like. He had an Ivy League background. He could tell me census statistics off the top of his head. And he'd read so much. He knew so much. And I wanted to know the books that he'd read. I wanted to know the things that I knew, that he knew, because I really, at the end of the day, wanted to know him. But more than anything else, I was drawn to his politics. I was drawn to his values. I was drawn to this person that knew so much about abolition. So I spent years after being assaulted doing psychological somersaults. I actually stayed with him a full year after it happened. I slept with him. I literally, physically, emotionally, everything, couldn't believe that the same person who professed this profound respect for women could do this to me. He, I think, still calls himself a feminist. And I was a strong queer woman of color. And a lot of my friends at the time loved him, and I think they still do. And I felt loved by him. I was loved by him. And I told myself a lot of things. I told myself I was drunk that night. I told myself that what happened was impossible. And then a couple of years later, after we broke up, I was hanging out with a friend at a cafe. And without thinking about it, without knowing it beforehand, I told her about the night that he assaulted me. And everything changed. I realized how hard it was to not just believe in your politics, but to live them. So a couple of years more pass, and I am healing. I go through a whole process. I'm in therapy. I go to EMDR, and it really works for me. And then a couple of years ago, I get an email from a listserv that I'm on in graduate school. And I learn from this email that he's gotten a really prestigious racial justice award from a fancy school. And he's coming back to UC Berkeley, where I'm still writing my dissertation, where I'm still going to school every day. And he's going to be on campus. And for years, I've spent an entire country apart from him. He's on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. And for me, that means I'm safe, right? I'm never going to bump into him. I'm never going to see him. But this email changes a lot. It means that he's going to be here. And I suddenly start going through this Rolodex of things in my head. Like, is he going to be here? Is he going to be nearby? Where is he going to stay? Am I going to bump into him? And I think the hardest question in all of the questions I ask myself is, how much do I believe in abolition? So I'm going to repeat the question that I started this with, which is, what did abolition look like for me? And there's something I want you to know about it, which is that abolition for survivors is not a foregone conclusion. My instinct is to punish him. My instinct is to expose him. My instinct is to hurt him. But I don't. Instead, I write a letter and I make a phone call. And the letter I write is to Columbia University, because they're the ones who've given him this fancy fellowship. And I'm hoping that they can keep him away from me. And then the person I call is a friend who's an activist. And on the phone, we decide together that she's going to support me. She's going to get me through this. And she is going to keep him away from me. So what happens next is that my phone rings every single day. And it feels like my phone rings every hour. And I get phone calls with the university a lot. So they're calling me and telling me that they opened an investigation, even though I didn't want them to, that I have to talk to the people who are investigating, that I have to do this, that, and the other. And to each one of these phone calls, I say no. And I make it clear to them that I don't believe in this kind of punishment and I don't believe in this kind of measure. And in a lot of ways, I think abolition for me is this series of no's to questions that other people asked on my behalf that I didn't want them to. And this is what leads me to this very last question. What did I get at the end of this process? So at this point, I'm getting a lot of phone calls, but it's not always the school. It's not always Columbia. As much of the time that it is Columbia University, I also get calls from the people who are supporting me. And there are a ton of those people. My friend, the activist, had gathered this collection of organizers, and they are amazing. They are the people who are housing the homeless. They are the people at the front line stopping police brutality. They are upending colorism. They're protecting survivors. All of them are people of color, and a lot of them, like me, are queer and trans. And they are all supporting me, every single one. And together, they created this barrier between me and this person who hurt me. And they're telling him the same thing over and over again, whether it's from South Africa or Brooklyn or California. Don't come to Berkeley. At the same time, right, I had to tell people at UC Berkeley. And when I told my academic advisor, the first thing she said was, I believe you. And the first thing she did was give me her credit card. And she said, you can get away from this if you want. I will buy you a plane ticket tomorrow, right now, and I will fly you out of here. You won't have to bump into him. You won't have to see him. You won't have to deal with this at all. And another thing that happened that I still really struggle to believe myself is that without meeting me, without seeing me, and honestly, without even knowing my name, Tarana Burke offered to out my perpetrator at a press conference because she knew one of the activists working on this process. So there are so many instances and examples of literal and figurative hand-holding, and I will be forever grateful for these. I don't know that this is about being indebted to folks. I don't think that's a healthy way of looking at it. But I do know that I will be appreciative and grateful for the rest of my life, for all of the people who helped me in this process, many of whom I've never even met. So what happened in the end? He never came back. He never came to Berkeley. All of these people were successful. They got him to stay on the East Coast, and I get to complete my doctorate, the first one in my family, without being afraid that I will bump into my rapist at any given point. I wrote a piece about this process a while ago, and in it, I said that abolition is a fragile trust vested in the world by survivors who want, need, and demand that community care is what we turn to rather than punishment. And I said that abolition is a lot of things, but easy isn't one of them. And I still believe that. I still believe that, even though I know that it took countless hours to achieve this feat, to achieve this level of support. I still believe that, even though, 20 people are involved. And I believe that, even though in a lot of ways I was unprepared to pay the cost of abolition. And I say that, but I also know that there are a lot of things that I didn't know before I started this process. I know that there are 20 people I can call. I know that there are people who are willing to lose money, jobs, and their reputations to support survivors. And I know that I don't need prisons and police to feel safe. I am not here to tell survivors what you need to do to feel safe. I am not here to tell survivors that you need or don't need to rely on prisons or policing. I'm a person who believes in being survivor-led, not survivor-centered. So that call that you make is up to you. But I will tell you that I still believe in abolition, and I probably will always believe in abolition. Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who's the founder of Critical Resistance, one of the co-founders rather of Critical Resistance, says that abolition means not just the closing of prisons, but the presence instead of vital systems of support that many communities lack. And I have believed in this for many years. And I believe it even more today because I've seen it in action. Thank you.